Welcome to whatever the heck this is what we're doing. It's kind of something like a webinar, something like an education, something a little different. You and I've spent a couple of days together, and we were just at KubeCon. We just built a new relationship between Lightbits Labs and Arctera InfoScale. And you spent a considerable amount of time working on this with the team, just getting everything ready and getting us ready for the KubeCon Atlanta event. I was hoping that you could just give me a little bit of insight as to who you are, why I know you're the expert, and then we can get into the work that you did and show this video and go over things. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to. So let's talk a little bit, my experience with Kubernetes and with Red Hat and OpenShift. I'm a very, very early user of Kubernetes since 2016. And prior to Lightbits, I spent a couple of years in Red Hat as the performance architect for the OpenShift storage solution. And I know the need and why everyone is trying to get the best storage to be used with the Kubernetes or with the OpenShift. And so one of the things that we always look into in Kubernetes is the ability to create some sort of a cluster-based DR between Kubernetes clusters. And that's where we kind of started to work on the partnership and relationship between Lightbits and Arctera / InfoScale. So that was like kind of the intro to what we worked on for the KubeCon at Atlanta. And by basically combining the two technologies, we are leveraging on one hand Lightbits performance and resiliency, ease of use, no special hardware is needed, no special networking is needed to connect volumes or PVCs in the case of OpenShift or Kubernetes into a cluster. And then we are leveraging the InfoScale DR operator to basically create a complete solution between two sites running OpenShift, two clusters of Lightbits, and having the ability to fail over between site to site.
It's usually pretty complex to do, wouldn't you say?
It is. And there's a few points that helps us. One is the use of operators in general, whether it's for Lightbits or for InfoScale, makes a lot of things easier. Most of the Kubernetes enthusiasts are like me, will try to do everything from the command line, can get pretty long and scary. So operators and doing things from the OpenShift console make things very easy in terms of just installing the right software and creating volumes, connections, and all of that. The other thing is that the InfoScale DR operator is actually very straightforward in terms of what you want to do. You got side A, you got side B. Do you want to only allow to move? You create basically a replication or a DR solution for a deployment. It can be also for a pod, but usually everything that you deploy in Kubernetes will be some sort of a deployment of a complete application. You tie it into the DR operator, and then you start to basically create the connection between the two sites. And that's pretty much it in terms of that. You can either let it run, and if deployment fails, immediately start it on the other cluster, or you can run it in a mode where you can do things manual, basically saying, I want to test it, I want to show it, or even just every 12 hours, I want to move something from one side to another.
So what I'm doing is kicking a video. It is the configuration that you did, and if you don't mind explaining that once I get this going, and we can see where we go from there. Sagi, so what we have here on the screen is that initial video that you sent me. And what I'd love for you to do is give us the walkthrough of what's going on and how, the integrations between the Arctera operators, the Lightbits Labs operators, and then what's happening to create the relationships between them. So please narrate as soon as I hit play.
Sure. Basically, what we're seeing is two OpenShift dashboards or consoles, however you want to call it. I'm showing basically what operators are installed. The two clusters are in different data centers, of course. We are seeing that we have the InfoScale DR manager on both of them, the InfoScale SDS operator, and also the Lightbits operator as well. In the Lightbits operator, we can see that we've installed the CSI drivers because we need those to access the Lightbits cluster, and we have a Lightbits cluster that is set up on each of the OpenShift clusters. So two different Lightbits cluster named Cluster 1 and Cluster 2, very sophisticated. Now we are going to look into basically the inside of the InfoScale SDS operator. And I guess before that, I'm showing basically the storage classes that exist in here. There's a storage class of a block device from Lightbits. There's a storage class from InfoScale. These three persistent volume claims exist on each of the OpenShift clusters. They are what Lightbits provide into the OpenShift cluster, so then the DR operator of InfoScale can use those. So those are marked InfoScale 1, 2, and 3, and this is what's basically InfoScale is going to build upon their own persistent volume claim with 4 DR and 4 communication between the sites.
So I'm pausing the video for 1 second. I'm curious, the configuration of the persistent volumes, is this traditionally how we just work through our, the normal CSI, or is there any kind of skill set that has to be brought to the table?
It's through CSI. The PVCs were created, it was a normal PVC that was created. The one thing that we didn't test because we didn't have any time, and that's something I did in the background, is that when you create a PVC, it creates the Lightbits volume in the Lightbits cluster, and it creates the persistent volume claim, but it is not mapped anywhere. It is not mapped to the OpenShift cluster or any worker node in OpenShift. So in order to get it mapped, you need someone to claim it, like a pod or something like that, or deployment. In this case, what I did is I went into the Lightbits side of things, and I've changed the ACL, basically where we announced to NVMe over TCP, map this volume to this server, and I manually said, oh, these PVCs that we created, these three map them into this OpenShift cluster and into this worker node, these three into that worker node. The other way around it, and it's something that, me and Marcelo said we're going to test in the future because they're going to have the ability to do it, is to actually have a dummy pod, a pod that does nothing, but it claims the volume, and then the volumes gets connected into the cluster. Now, the pod doesn't do anything with that. It basically handed out into InfoScale. So we just didn't have any time to test all of that, so I just did this one thing in the background. But even in the future, if you want to automate this, then you can easily create a Helm chart or something that will create the volumes and map them. There's nothing, there's no rocket science in here.
Love it. Love it. All right. I'm going to start the video again.
Okay. So once we have Lightbits volumes on each of the Lightbits clusters connected basically into the two OpenShift clusters, we are going to look at what needs to be done from the InfoScale perspective. So the first thing that I've showed is the global cluster membership, and that's where we are connecting basically a heartbeat between these two clusters. And then we are basically creating a data replication of a specific deployment. We just created a simple Postgres deployment, and we are basically going to tie that deployment of Postgres into a data replication. That means that deployment resides now on an InfoScale SDS that is spread amongst the Lightbits volumes on cluster 1 and the Lightbits volumes on cluster 2. Basically, spread. There's access from the deployment from any OpenShift cluster to the same data. I think the recovery plan here was set as manual, and that is so we can actually show the migration or how a deployment basically transfers from one OpenShift cluster to another. And what I'm showing here is basically that the Postgres deployment on The second OpenShift cluster doesn't exist. It exists only on the first one. Okay? Only when we will do a failover, it will immediately show up as a running deployment over there. So this is the data replication that we created. We just called it a Postgres rep. And basically, in order to manually start it, we are going to flip a switch, if you want to call it, in a YAML file and start the DR to the second side, which is, you see the cluster failover policy is manual. And what we are going to do is primary cluster is right now info 1. We're just going to force it to change into info 2 and basically migrate the deployment from one OpenShift cluster to another OpenShift cluster. So now basically the heartbeat between the two clusters gets the information. We manually are failing this deployment. It has to go to whatever other side it is replicated to. And the deployment is migrating. And now when we will look for the Postgres deployment on the second cluster, actually we're showing that it doesn't exist on the first cluster. It's already migrated and it's running on the second cluster. That's basically was just a manual work of deployment, going from one OpenShift cluster to another OpenShift cluster.
So this is full replication. We're not cloning something and bringing it up, but it's full replication from site A to site B.
Yeah, yeah,
Excellent.
and we've done this example at the deployment level. As I said, I think there's all sorts of tiers that you can do it with the InfoScale DR operator. But this is something that will be very common because you might have plenty of deployments or applications on your OpenShift cluster that you don't want to recover. But there are specific ones that have to be, they have data, they are a stateful application that you want to choose that in any case of a failover, I got to have it running on the other cluster.
Great. Sagi, that was impressive in the sense that there's a lot going on there. You've got the benefits and simplicity that we bring to the table with our CSI. We've integrated another partner. We very simply created the relationship for a Postgres DR instance, and you just flipped it all within a couple of minutes. I know there was time that it took for configuration, but at the end of the day, I mean, you were hands-on with this. Our technology. You're coming to understand the Arctera technology. What's your gut? What are your insights on what we can do in the future that this brings for us?
Yeah, I mean, this is very helpful for our customers that needs to have a complete DR solution between two Kubernetes or OpenShift clusters or many, because I think there in the future there's going to be a way to do one to many, and that will expand basically the relationship between also Lightbits and InfoScale. Once you, like any technology, once you do the initial setup, especially of the heartbeat, which to be honest was fairly easy between the two OpenShift clusters, starting to have the DR working on several deployments is really easy. If you're a GUI person or a dashboard person, it's just marking something and saying, yeah, I want this part of the DR. And if you want to do something in the YAML file method, then you can definitely do that by creating a relationship that ties itself into a deployment. It's easy as that.
Got it. Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I know we came together very quickly to show the beginning of our partnership, and it's only going to get deeper from here. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can put together and what the next video around this Lightbits and Arctera is going to bring. So thank you very much for your time. I know you worked your butt off on this, trying to get us the demo ready before KubeCon. And I know that I, as well as the many people who watch this video multiple times, appreciate the effort you put in. And thank you, man. You're exceptional at what you do.
Thank you.